Well, time to make another video now that we're halfway through November. How was I in my last video? You hypocritical I consider this genuinely bad writing. Watching this gives the same tonal whiplash as Bambi's mom getting shot. Yeah, I might have overdid it a bit. I don't want to make that my channel identity. So to even it out, why don't we talk about something nice? Something very autumn for the season. Something maybe Thanksgiving-y. Freebirds? Nah, better not. What really shows off the feeling of fall that I can cover? Oh, I know exactly. Over the Garden Wall. I don't think there has ever been another CN show quite like it. Over the Garden Wall is a miniseries by Cartoon Network that was released in the week of November 3rd in 2014 and was created by Patrick McHale, who has previous experience in the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack and Adventure Time. You can definitely see the influence in places. It also has a very high profile voice cast, with some notable ones being Elijah Wood as Wirt, Milena Linsky as Beatrice, Christopher Lloyd as the Woodsman, John Cleese, and Tim Curry. The show is about two brothers, Wirt and Greg, lost in the mysterious autumn woods called the Unknown, helped by a talking bird named Beatrice as they are met with mysterious towns, locations, and people as they try to find their way back home, all while being stalked by a shadowy creature simply known as the Beast. With only 12 minutes and 10 episodes, it doesn't seem like it has that much time to really flesh out its world and story. But Over the Garden Wall keeps things really as simple as it needs to be. It spaces out its narrative as much as it really needs to, and makes sure that it keeps all its locations as memorable as possible. It explains as much about its world as it needs, while still keeping plenty of things mysterious and ambiguous. It is called The Unknown after all. But it's full of emotional moments, character development, and a surprising allegory if you don't know already. And it's a very quiet cartoon. While plenty of other cartoons are super in your face, bright, loud, colorful, and zany, Over the Garden Wall really isn't. And it's one of the reasons it feels so different from other cartoons. It's not completely devoid of those things, but it's a very different attitude and atmosphere. It really captures the feeling of a quiet walk in the woods during the fall. And that's why I think it's the perfect thing to watch right now as we reach the end of autumn. So, let's take a little trip into the unknown, shall we? We begin with a frog playing a piano, good start, but we also get random snippets of weird, no context events. But you'll actually see this works as foreshadowing for all future episodes, which is great on rewatch, so keep them in mind as we go along. And then onto our title card. With the music and art style, it's clear the entire series takes on a New England vintage aesthetic, like old book illustrations, which is really unique for a kids show in the modern day. And it's another thing that makes Over the Garden Wall pop out and feel more mature in a way. It really does feel like an old storybook in all episodes, and episodes being called chapters really reinforces it. Almost like a Tome of the Unknown, if you know what I mean. Even though most of the designs just made me think of Animal Crossing. A narrator even says at the start that the unknown is a mysterious place where long forgotten stories are revealed to those who travel through the woods. Here we get introduced to our protagonists, Wirt and Greg, walking through the dark forest. Now, I say this series really captures autumn, but not so much in this first episode. The woods at night feel truly terrifying, with the dark shadows and gloomy fog, and is framed and shot to be otherworldly. Though this is the case for many other episodes we see later. The way they handle the dark here is truly great and sets up how dangerous and foreboding the unknown really is. We see Greg trying to find a name for his frankly huge frog, as Wirt suddenly realizes they don't know where they are, and they don't seem to know how they got there. It's like they got isekai'd in, frankly, one of the most disappointing worlds you could have gone to. We also clearly see the dynamics between the brothers, as Wirt is very anxious and looks to overanalyze things, as Greg is very naive and silly, being, well, just a little kid. They do find a woodsman with a lit lantern chopping down a disturbing looking tree that has flesh-like bark, a carved face in agony, and black sap-like blood. But Wirt doesn't know if they should ask for help. But they meet a talking bird who offers the help, who we'll later see as Beatrice, as the two, Wirt can't believe what they're seeing. But they flee as the woodsman finds them and warn them they shouldn't be in the woods, with the entity known as the Beast lurking, seeking lost souls. He takes them to a house with a mill, which he clarifies he found abandoned, and is using the mill to make oil for his lantern, made out of the edelwood trees we see. It's a job he's very serious about. Wirt doesn't know if he should stay or leave since he can't tell if the woodsman is crazy, but it's not long before a frankly terrifying wolf monster attacks them, being lured by the candy Greg tossed earlier, and knocks the woodsman out. As the brothers are chased through the mill in a pretty tense sequence, before the monster gets trapped in the mill and regurgitates a black turtle, which Greg put candy on in the previous scene. The monster is shown to actually be an ordinary dog. The same dog in the intro if you notice, as Wirt thinks they dealt with the beast, but the woodsman says that's not the beast, and it can't be defeated like some creature, and berates them for destroying the mill he needs. Wirt blames Greg, but the woodsman says Wirt is responsible as the older brother, which is a theme that becomes very important later. The woodsman says they should leave, and directs them to a town north they can try to go to, and warns them of the unknown and the beast as the episode soon comes to an end. Now, this episode has the same vibe as a scary fairy tale, which a few other episodes also keep the spirit of, and it immediately sets up the tone and danger of the setting right away. The threats of the unknown are made perfectly clear as this is not a normal forest, setting up the unusual locations and beings of this world. The atmosphere really draws you in the same vibe as a few episodes of Gravity Falls can, and I think it really helps as to why this show has gathered such a following. The next episode is in the day, and gives us much more of that autumn atmosphere. There's such a gorgeous establishing shots of the amber woods and sunlight bathing in that feels so warm and enveloping like fall can be. I gotta say, this show is so gorgeous in its atmosphere and backgrounds. They feel like a landscape painting you'd see in an old house come to life and being walked through. It feels almost magical. It really helps to reinforce that illustrated fairy tale look the show has. But the two have been walking since last night to find that town, but Greg gets distracted by a voice. It's actually Beatrice, who says she's stuck in a bush and needs help, and offers a favor in return. She says she can offer to help them by taking them to Adelaide of the Pasture, who can help them get home. So Beatrice tags along the journey as they go to the town of Pottsfield. Beatrice also shows a much more cynical and jaded side that weirdly contrasts with her whimsical promise.
My brother's name is Wirt.
Who cares? Okay, that's great. How about you and I ditch your brother?
Though Pottsfield is already off by the ambient fog and grayer atmosphere than the woods before it. The town itself is drawn with much more darker shadows than the morning it leads to be, but the town is seemingly abandoned until they hear singing from a farmhouse, which has a bunch of people dressed as pumpkins in a sort of festival. Curiously, one says,
Say, aren't you a little too early?
What do you mean?
I mean, it doesn't seem like you're ready to join us just yet.
foreshadowing. But when they say they want to leave, they get the crowd's attention as they surround them, and suddenly a giant pumpkin king thingy named Enoch, who leads them, considers them trespassers and wants to sentence them. But they are only sentenced to some hours of work, which they gladly take after that creepy scene. As well as just feeling like autumn in general, this show is also really great for plenty of Halloween atmosphere, with of course the pumpkin people, but also the sinister tone as well. It's freaking fantastic. And after a short work montage, they end up digging some ditches. Beatrice points out why are they digging such deep ditches on a farm, and she brings up they might be digging their own graves. Wirt doesn't believe her until Greg digs up an actual skeleton. But before they can do anything about it, Enoch and the other pumpkin people come, as Wirt gets Beatrice to try to break their chains, as Wirt distracts them. But then...
They got in the way of all the dirt, you know, and...
There are like 4 jokes I can make with this. But yeah, it turns out everyone was dead all along. All the work they were doing were to get the other residents out for the party. Enoch lets them go and asks if they want to stay, but leaves with this ominous message.
Oh well, you'll join us someday.
Wirt runs out of town as fast as possible, but Beatrice says that since they were in actual danger, she still owes them a favor, leading them to Adelaide to get back home. As she also brings up that she wants to go back home in her own way. While not quite as scary as the first, it still sets up a great spooky autumn atmosphere, with a great twist and eerie vibes, and also puts Beatrice in the group as a main character. The next episode is much more lighthearted and probably the least important episode in the miniseries, where it's about Wirt and Greg stopping by a schoolhouse with animal kids being taught by a teacher, missing her fiance who disappeared and just kinda chill there. Oh yeah, and there's a killer girl on the loose, but that's not important. It's a pretty lighthearted episode, mostly just a small stake adventure. It helps to build upon the characters more, with establishing Wirt and Beatrice butting heads, and Greg allowed to go really silly with his earworm of a song, Potatoes and Molasses.
Oh, potatoes and molasses. If you want some, oh, just ask us.
I'd say it's the most kid-friendly episode, probably, but it's not a bad thing. It's nice to show that it's not all bad in the unknown, and has a happy ending where Wirt and Greg help save the school by putting on a concert fundraiser. Also, the gorilla was a teacher's fiancé all along and got stuck in a circus gorilla suit the entire time. Fine episode, but probably the most skippable. We get much more importance in the 4th episode, which start with them hiding in a hay cart as the driver flees the beast. It's actually interesting how many episodes don't really start with a continued link with the previous one, with the characters suddenly in a new location, with little explanation on how they got there. Helps to build up the time ambiguity of the series, where it's hard to know exactly how long the group has been wandering in the unknown, from days, to weeks, to maybe even months. The woodsman is also here to establish him in the episode for later, still looking for Edelwood for his lantern. They go to a nearby tavern for shelter and directions, though Beatrice has to sit outside with a horse. Though Wirt tries to ask for directions, the tavern goers are too preoccupied with figuring out who he is, as in what type of character he is, as each lists their own profession and roles.
Well, he's the butcher,
I'm the butcher.
the baker, the midwife, the master and apprentice, the tailor, and I'm the tavern keeper.
They consider him to be the lover after misunderstanding, but more accurately say he's the pilgrim, a man on an important journey that will change who he is. Though the tavern panics as Wirt brings out the beast, we finally get a bit of an explanation to it, where the tavern keeps singing a song how the beast hunts down lost souls to trap them in the unknown, where he'll turn him into a tree to use the oil to keep his lantern burning, which is really important information for later.
Ooh, better beware. Ooh, the beast is out there. Ooh, better be wise and don't believe his lies.
Wirt thinks the lantern is linked to the woodsman, and think he might be the beast after all. Though hearing Beatrice's scream, Wirt takes a horse and goes to save her, where they see her knocked out by a disturbing Edelwood tree with the woodsman. Fearing the worst that he's turning her into an Edelwood tree, he fights off the woodsman, knocking his lantern down before fleeing on the horse. But Beatrice wakes up and says that she knocked herself out by flying into a tree after seeing a weird shadow. It's also revealed that the horse was actually a talking horse named Fred who helps him out.
Oh, Beatrice, meet Fred the horse.
Nice to horse your acquaintance.
Though before the episode ends, we see this shadowy figure, the true beast. A silhouetted Wendigo-like figure with glowing white eyes and a deep voice, which is actually voiced by a real opera singer. They taunt the woodsman, offering to take the woodsman's lantern for themselves. He says that he's running out of oil and that he needs to keep it lit for his daughter's soul. He mocks them and says he's going after the children as he sings in the night sky. This is a great episode, though mostly in its great atmosphere and build-up of the main antagonist. Though the tavern scenes can meander around a bit, mostly in the lovers scene, it does reinforce the travels they went on, and nicely gives us some explanation to the beast, and the final climax was great, and getting to finally see the beast itself, and it really helped us set the tone and story for the rest of the series. The next episode, Mad Love, is less important and more lighthearted, as we immediately start in the mansion of a wealthy and eccentric tea mogul, Quincy Endicott, which you later see they are tricking him to think that they're his nephew so they can get his money. Though Wirt is against it, Beatrice says that they only need 2 cents for the ferry ride to Adelaide, which Wirt thinks they can find some loose change, as Greg hits off well with Quincy and offers to help him, as his main conflict is that he thought he saw a ghost in one of his rooms and worries about it or if he's going mad. Now the episode is pretty lighthearted and it mostly is just them in the mansion and Greg and Quincy's eccentricities working off each other, though it does give us probably the best joke in the series.
You more like flat out stealing from him?
What? No way.
Why not? We already stole a horse.
Hey guys,
No, we didn't. Fred's a talking horse. He can do whatever he wants.
I want to steal.
Oh, that's great. But it also has some great interactions with Greg, Quincy, and even Fred.
Glendicott, it's just a funny chicken.
It's too big. Get a grip.
Actually, let me talk about Greg. The show's atmosphere is very somber and dark, mostly trying to emulate the loneliness and dread of the uncomfortable woods of the unknown. Other characters like Wirt and Beatrice are much more reserved and serious, which is why Greg plays the role as the primary comic relief, with his childlike wonder and naivety. He makes the events much more fun and less off-putting and dark, and still makes it feel like a kid's show in a way. It's surprising how he's not really annoying. A kid's sidekick like this can be insanely annoying, and I really have a low tolerance for obnoxious characters, but Greg surprisingly isn't. He isn't loud or obnoxious, he's just in his own little world and has his own reasonings and motivations that also sometimes help him a lot in a given situation. He has a sort of infectious optimism with him. They did a great job on him.
I'm gonna call you Kitty.
What? Maybe I'll start calling you Candy Pants.
Whoa, yeah!
Though this episode is also important as Wirt and Beatrice start to open up to each other. Like Wirt admitting he has a crush on a girl named Sarah and plays clarinet, and more importantly, Beatrice revealing that she wasn't actually a bluebird, and the reason she can talk is that she got herself and her family cursed to become bluebirds, and she refused to go back to them until she can cure them, which is why she wants to go to Adelaide. It's a really, well, humanizing and interesting turn for a character who for the most part is very abrasive and cynical. The story ends with it turning out that what Quincy saw was the owner of another mansion, who was another teen mogul, and that their mansions got so big that they interconnected with each other, and they fall in love. They leave Greg with 2 cents, hopefully for the ferry, as Fred leaves the group to work for the Two's tea company to get an honest job, which is kinda disappointing since we never really got to know Fred that much. There's actually a lot left in the air, like why can he talk, what was he doing in the tavern, why does he want to steal so much, was he a human curse like Beatrice?
I'll never steal again, I swear. I'll get an honest job.
I know the story was originally much longer and got condensed into the miniseries, so I wonder if Fred was going to have a larger role. There's just not a lot explained, but hey, at least he got a happy ending.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And don't forget to buy Endicott brand tea.
But not our heroes, as Greg tosses his coin since, well, he ain't got no sense. But the next episode changes things up in a serious way, as we cut to them on the ferry with no explanation. Okay, that's not true, as it was said they snuck aboard since they didn't have the money to pay. Also, the boat is full of Antho Frog people. Though an important thing I've noticed is that they say they are very close to Adelaide, and Greg and Wirt are excited, but Beatrice is not happy about it, and if anything, they want to delay themselves from getting there. So it's very off-putting for her when she was once hell-bent on getting there ASAP. It could just be she doesn't want to let them leave after getting to know them, especially after the last episode, but it could be something more. Though it's not long before the Fargate security catches them, and results in a Buster Keaton-like chase across the boat, although they hide in a closet and come out dressed as a frog person in a Looney Tunes style way, with Greg's frog as the head, but they are pushed to the ferry band and asked to play. Beatrice urges Wirt to play the bassoon after learning he plays clarinet in the last episode. He eventually gives in, with Greg's frog singing, what? Yeah, Greg's frog out of nowhere has a professional singing voice and puts on a big performance to the joy of the passengers.
A single soul sets his voice singing, content to be slightly forlorn.
It's never explained how or why this happened. It's really weird and leads to a lot of questions, but it's not long before they're revealed. But luckily the audience loved the performances, so they're allowed to stay. And it ends on this beautiful shot.
And over the garden wall to thee.
So yeah, nice episode, but oh yeah, it's not over. Weird, it seemed like a perfect place, but the story isn't done yet. The ferry gets off when the passengers immediately start diving into the mud. It seems weird until you realize this is what frogs do to hibernate during winter, which foreshadows the coming seasonal change if you realize it. Wirt wants to go to Adelaide right now, but Beatrice convinces him to wait the night, seemingly very worried. They talk for a little bit, with Wirt talking about how he wanted to flirt with his crush Sarah, but a guy named Jason Thunderbreaker stole his chance, which he says with extreme jealousy. Beatrice tries to convince them to stay, but Wirt's not sure. She leaves in the middle of the night, which awakens the boys who follow her. She reaches Adelaide, who is a frail, sickly, witch-like woman, who tells them not to let in the night air or she'll catch her death. Beatrice shows she already knows them, and it's revealed Beatrice's plan for all of this. It's revealed that Adelaide made a deal with Beatrice for her to give her the enchanted scissors, which can break the curse on her family if she gives her children to work for her. Which is a real shocker after all they went through, but makes sense when you look back at her actions, her forced commitment to them at first, and her determination to get them to Adelaide as soon as possible.
You two are lost kids with no purpose in life, right?
Uh-huh.
Can't leave. I'm honor bound to help you since you guys helped me. That's the Bluebird rules.
But as she got to know them, she hesitates. But Beatrice finds out that Adelaide was actually planning to enslave them since she can't do any work by herself. Beatrice offers to take their place if Adelaide removes the curse. But then, Wirt and Greg show up, which Adelaide immediately captures them. Wirt realizes Beatrice was betraying them the whole time and is destroyed. Adelaide also implies that she's being influenced by the beast, which is weird later on. But Beatrice turns on Adelaide and opens the window as the cold night air quickly and rather disturbingly melts her as she dies. The brothers escape before Beatrice can explain as she breaks down, now all alone. It ends with the brothers walking alone in the night fog, with Wirt now heartbroken and hardened after losing who he considered a friend. Now this episode is a real turning point to the series. It's amazing how it starts out so light-hearted and fun, and then blindsides you with a plot twist and character breakup. It's something you might have expected if you can pick up the clues, but it hits hard. The story hereafter becomes much darker, and it's also seen in the atmosphere, as this is the last time you see a truly bright and loving fall. But the next episode is truly where the series feels like it goes into horror. Once more, the two are out in the rain, as Greg wants to wait for Beatrice, but Wirt says they don't need her. Wirt's also getting a lot more short with Greg after what happened, but they soon meet with the woodsman yet again, which to remind you at this point they believe he is the beast. The woodsman warns them that the beast is after them and to never give up hope or else they will perish. He begs them to listen as they flee until the real beast reveals themselves, showing how close they were, and invites the woodsman to talk. They flee into an old cottage, with a basket filled with those weird black turtles from the first episode. But they meet a young girl named Lorna, who lives in the cottage.
Who are you? We're burglars!
No, we thought this place was abandoned,
So we came here to burgle your turts.
Who warns them the hype of her Auntie Whispers shows up. They hide in the turtle basket as Auntie Whispers comes in, who is a huge, unproportional, witch-like woman with a giant head and owl-like eyes. They ask if anyone has come, and that if no one has, then no one will be devoured. Lorna lies, but Auntie Whispers sees through it and says she can smell the children in her house as the suspense builds. Auntie Whisper then uses a weird enchanted bell that seems to possess Lorna, as she says they're in the basket. Auntie Whisper said that they will meet their doom by setting foot in their house, but they think that Lorna was actually talking about the live turtles instead. She then eats one alive before going back to sleep, which if you remember the first episode, that eating one of these black turtles will turn into a monster like the dog. But Auntie Whispers can apparently eat them fine, though their appearance suggests otherwise. Before she goes upstairs, Auntie Whispers orders her to do chores, which include dealing with the bones of those eaten before. Hey, maybe those guys at Pottsfield will take them. But she also uses the bell to force her to clean the floors too. Though Auntie Whispers says she does this out of love to keep the evil spirit from driving her to wickedness. So yeah, already this episode gives us a pretty unnerving start.
You have entered the house of doom, children. Your doom.
Wirt asks if Lorna is okay since he seems very sick, which he says because of her illness that Auntie Whispers make her work so much. But she says Auntie doesn't allow visitors since outsiders will lead to her become wicked. This whole situation feels like a very big Puritan Salem-esque thing, though it's also brought up that Auntie Whispers isn't even related to Lorna, but acts as her guardian. Wirt is concerned for her and offers to help her on her numerous chores, and even offers her to leave with them. She thinks it could work out, as we get a cleaning montage which really shows the two are starting to gain affection for each other and it's super cute. But when Greg's frog goes in the attic, it wakes up Auntie Whispers, who warns they will be devoured unless they get away from Lorna. Though Auntie Whispers loses the bell as the three go into the closet. But then we see... Yeesh! So yeah, Lorna was actually the killer all along.
Oh, for some reason I thought that old lady was the people eater, but it was Lorna all along.
Yeah, what he said. It's actually a really good twist, especially if you go back and really pick apart what Auntie Whispers was saying. Lorna's possessed form is truly terrifying, with that horrifying face and voice and just the juxtaposition to her normal self.
Sorry, my turtles, but I must fear.
It seems like this that really drive the autumn Halloween-like horror of the series absolutely love. Lorna is possessed by an evil spirit, as the two break out of the closet and run to the marsh, where Greg shows that his frog swallowed the bell when it was in the attic, and where it uses it to exorcise the demon out of Lorna for good. Though, I wonder why Auntie Whispers never did that before. Auntie Whispers is glad she's okay, but cries since now she wouldn't need her to look after them. But Lorna considers her to be her family, and refuses to leave her, which is a sweet moment since a creepy episode. Though, Auntie Whispers gives the boys some advice to not trust Adelaide, who is revealed to be her sister. I mean, it's a little too late at this point when she's dead. Wonder how she'd react to that. But yeah, really interesting idea that her and Adelaide are related considering the witch themes. But unfortunately, we don't know much beyond that. Lorna says goodbye and hopes they can meet again, with Wirt visibly hurt that she has to go after their relationship was building. I think losing Lorna so close after losing Beatrice was really one of the biggest catalysts to Wirt's emotional downfall in the next episodes, as it creates a depression that sees into him losing hope of ever going back home. Also, we get one last glimpse of the beast stalking them at night, urging them in the shadows to lose hope. He once more taunts the woodsman about keeping the light of his daughter's soul lit, and that they'll need the boy's soul to do so. We get the beast's ominous monologue as we end.
No, there is only me. There is only my way. There is only the forest, and there is only surrender.
Man, what an episode. It truly draws out the creepiness factor not seen since episode 1. It's one of those episodes that are perfect for Halloween with great atmosphere and suspense and a great twist as well. Though it's the last self-contained episode before the rest of the series goes into its serious plot. Episode 8 starts out with Winter arriving in the unknown, turning the whimsical forest into a chilly, foggy wasteland. Beatrice is lost trying to find them, and the boys are on a makeshift boat, passing by a fisherman fish, with Wirt at his lowest. They hear the singing of the beast as it gets closer, with Wirt's depression, as he suspects it's coming for them, but they can't do anything about it. Greg tries to help in his usual way, but Wirt just doesn't care. Greg tries to keep up his hope, but Wirt says to stop pretending that they're going home. He says they never are and they're lost for good. He tells Greg to stop being ridiculous and it's his fault they got in this mess. Greg didn't realize it, but it's the only indication so far of how they got there. He says he's done with him and they can have the responsibility of going back home. It's interesting to think back to the first episode, where the woodsman chastises Wirt, saying that he can't blame Greg as he's the older and mature sibling who should take responsibility, and Wirt at his breaking point pretty much lets go of that now. Greg interprets this as him being the leader, as Wirt sleeps by a tree and Greg follows. Greg still hasn't given up hope, he just says he'll do his best to get them home. He makes a wish on a star to find a way to get them back home. The star shines on him as he seems to dream, as he ascends into a cartoon city in the clouds called Cloud City, which is heavily influenced by old Fleischer era cartoons and a little bit of Little Nemo too. It's so weird to see such different designs and tone in the show, but it's definitely not a bad thing, as it really makes the episode more interesting. And it helps to reinforce the vintage aesthetic the show is pretty much all about. I know Cuphead didn't invent rubber hose animation, but as a fan of the games, it's hard to look at these designs and backgrounds and not think of it. It's a nice change of pace to the dreary atmosphere of the previous episode and scene. Wirt wants to learn how to lead, and leads a musical performance that's all whimsical and bright and colorful. But during it, Greg accidentally unleashes a sort of villain, the North Wind, who causes trouble in the city, which is implied to be the cold, bitter winter wind which the brothers are facing as winter arrives in the unknown. The North Wind has the same vibe as many Fleischer era antagonists, with their own big musical entrance and boisterous attitude, so it's like they came right out of an old Betty Boop cartoon or something. But after a cartoony scuffle, Greg manages to seal them away in a bottle and save the city. So the Queen of the Clouds comes down to thank them and offers them one wish. Greg wishes that he and Wirt can go home, but the Queen of the Clouds says that while she can send Greg home, Wirt is too lost, as the beast has claimed him, as we see Edelwood roots wrapping around him as he turns into an Edelwood tree as he loses hope. Which is really weird since Greg shouldn't know this stuff, especially while he's asleep, so it blurs the line if this is all real and is actually happening somehow. Greg puts the blame on himself that he was goofing off again, and then wishes for something else. To take Wirt's place. Greg says goodbye to him, apologizes, and asks to take care of his frog, as Wirt is too asleep and depressed to care. Wirt hears the beast say to Greg that he'll send him home if he accomplishes his tasks, and then wakes up to see him missing. He realizes what's going on and tears out the Edelwood branches as he runs into the snowy night, desperate to find his brother. But winter has turned the unknown into a barren tundra. He becomes delirious hearing the beast and Greg as he falls into an icy river and nearly dies, but is saved by Beatrice and the fisherman as he blacks out. End the episode. Now this is the real turning point of the series where it just goes into continual drama. Seeing Wirt so depressed and practically willing to die hurts so much after the journey, but you can feel how the hardships he's going through as he's lost hope. And especially hurts to see him take it out on Greg, who didn't do anything to deserve it. This is the last case of a real lighthearted adventure in the series. Even that is quickly dashed by the depressing ending, where Greg sacrifices himself to save Wirt, and Wirt desperately trying to find him, nearly dying in the process. It's a super intense ending that leads us to the final 2 episodes. Now I really gotta say, please watch the series if you haven't already. Watching it for yourself is much more rewarding than hearing me just talk about it, so please watch it if you are able. Okay then, time for the last 2 episodes. Episode 9, Into the Unknown, is surprising as it actually flashes back to before the two got into the unknown. And as a bonus twist, it shows the series takes place in a much more modern day than you'd think. It's actually a pretty decent surprise since Wirt and Greg's outfits are much more old-fashioned and weird, and the show never really points to anything modern about them, except for maybe the candy Greg had being in plastic wrap, but even then that can be justified for it being older. Though it seems to be more in the 80s or 90s, but still much older than the almost colonial time period you would expect. We see Wirt dressed normally as we find it's actually Halloween, and Wirt's weird gnome hobbit person outfit was actually a Rust Halloween costume. We also get an explanation on why Greg has a teapot on his head in the series. It's because it used it as an elephant costume, which is really funny looking back.
It's an elephant costume. Woo! Woo! See my trunk, you old lady Daniels?
Goodbye, Gregory. And please don't call me old lady.
Yes, sir, young man.
Greg wants him to help him find frogs, but Wirt is too focused on giving a tape of some poetry and clarinet he wrote to his crush Sarah. Though Wirt is nervous, Greg takes it to other kids, which ends up in Sarah's jacket to Wirt's embarrassment. He's even more nervous after hearing Jason Thunderburger from before is going to ask her out, which makes Wirt extra nervous. Wirt says he can't compete with him since he's a total package, and tries to get the tape back before Sarah and Jason can hear it. We actually see Sarah in her Halloween costume that looks like a fusion of Pennywise and the Babadook as they go to a Halloween party, where Sarah invites them to go to the graveyard with a couple of friends while they drink what they clarify are safe drinks.
Like juice?
Yeah, and whatever. Age-appropriate stuff that's not illegal.
You know, in case you had any suspicions.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Jason Thunderburger. Oh, hey, Wirt.
Yep, that's Jason Thunderburger. It's kind of an amazing twist since Wirt builds him up so much you'd think he'd be a huge jock, but no, he's a squeaky nerd.
My ex-boyfriend, Octavius Rex, aka Long, Dan, and Handsome.
Meep. Whoa.
But they go to the graveyard, which Wirt tries to get the take back in. That's weird. But the police come to see what's going on, mostly as a joke, where everyone flees, and the two brothers climb over the garden wall, and Wirt sees Sarah and Jason with his tape. Wirt thinks he's done for as they jump to the other side, with Wirt mad at Greg saying he ruins his life as well as his stepdad. Though Greg finds his frog here, which is interesting as it makes his random singing even weirder when it shows he's from the normal world. But they find them on train tracks as a train comes barely towards them. The two seemingly barely jump out of the way as they tumble down the hill and into the lake, where it seems they ended up in the unknown. Wait a minute. Getting transported into a mystical world after an accident with a locomotive? This really is an isekai! So yeah, it's pretty much shown that the unknown is a sort of limbo world the brothers are in this life or death experience, which implies much more, which I'll get to later. But this flashback looks to be Wirt's life flashing before his eyes as he wakes up in a tree surrounded by bluebirds. And we soon see this is actually Beatrice's family, which as you remember, were all cursed to be bluebirds as well. They said he was dropped at their doorstep and they want to know where Beatrice is. Wirt doesn't know, but knows he has to find his brother before it's too late. And we get this line, which goes really hard.
You'd be no good to your brother dead. I was never any good to him alive either.
And it ends with Wirt out in the snow going to find him. What an episode. We finally get some history in this episode and finally get to know how they got lost in the unknown. It still raises plenty of questions on how it works, but it's nice to get some validation. It's also left unclear if this is all real or a near-death hallucination, but it's a great surprise as our penultimate episode and gives the stakes and setup for our last episode of the miniseries. Now to end it with The Unknown. The blizzard picks up as Beatrice tries to find Greg before she gets blown away by it. It seems the beast is trying to make Greg give up hope by giving him seemingly impossible tasks Greg inexplicably whimsies his way past. It's actually really funny to see him getting annoyed by it.
You fetch for me the golden comb?
Will that work?
This is a honeycomb.
Golden comb of honey.
Even though Greg is optimistic through it, he is visibly being sickened, likely by overexposure to the blizzard or by the beast's presence. The beast is off put by Greg's determination, but knows to wait for him to get weakened by the cold in order to get his soul. Beatrice flies to Wirt, who tells him they saw Greg, as Wirt, after seeing her family, tells her to go home, but she can't until they get Greg. Wirt agrees. We go back to the woodsman, now out of Ada wood for his lantern, as the beast calls for him. The sun sets as the forest goes into frigid night. The atmosphere builds in the darkness with the beast operatic singing, only lit by the woodsman lantern. The music is so fantastic here. The beast offers them more Ada wood, revealing Greg, looking like he's dying as he is turning into an Ada wood tree. It's It's a truly heartbreaking and gruesome moment to see such a fun and lighthearted kid practically dead. The woodsman refuses to use his body for fuel, saying he didn't know they were from actual people, and then we get...
And would it have mattered? Would you have just let your daughter's spirit burn out forever? Feed the lantern.
We see the beast's eyes closer for the first time, showing the same color pattern as the false beast in the first episode, which has really interesting implications. The beast says it's either him or his daughter. The woodsman tries to free Greg, but the beast tries to take the lantern, saying he's only there to help them, as the woodsman loses his temper and attacks, as the beast laughs and dodges his axe. Meanwhile, Wirt in the darkness follows the light of the lantern and sees the dying Greg. Though Greg is still alive, which relieves Wirt. Greg apologizes for messing up, but Wirt actually speaks up that none of it was his fault, and it was all because of him that they're in this place, which is a great moment of maturity after he continually blames Greg in the previous episodes. Greg is sorry for stealing a rock, which showed up a few times before that he got from the woman in the previous episode. Greg passes out as Wirt cries and tries to pry him out of the Adawood branches, but it's too strong. Though the beast apparently overpowered the woodsman, and Wirt sees the beast for the first time, who demands their lantern back. He says his brother's too weak to go home, and he'll soon be another tree in his forest of lost souls. He offers to make Wirt a deal, to put Greg's soul in the lantern to keep him alive, with Wirt now taking the task of the woodsman to collect Adawood to keep his soul burning. Wirt hesitates, but eventually agrees, coming closer to the beast. But before he can commit, he stops himself, saying he can't live a life of wandering in the forest for oil. He points out that the beast must have an obsession with the Dark Lantern, like it's his soul in there. The beast rises at this point and sends Wirt into abyssal darkness. We get another look at the beast's true eyes before.
Are you ready to see true darkness?
Are you?
Don't!
Damn, that scene went hard. After confirming that his soul is in the lantern after all, he gives the lantern back to the woodsman and gets the axe to free Greg, carrying him out of the woods. Wirt asks Beatrice to come with them, but Beatrice says he can't and she'll go home to her family to say that she failed. But Wirt pulls out Adelaide's enchanted scissors, which reveal that he used them to free himself all those episodes ago, which you can theorize if you look back. Beatrice cries as they embrace for the last time as they walk into the darkness. With just the woodsman and the beast, the woodsman realizes his daughter's soul was never in the lantern, and the beast was manipulating them the whole time. The beast, refusing to give up on his lie, goads him to killing the three to keep the lantern lit. The woodsman shines the lantern light on the beast and reveals Jesus! It's only for a second, but Jesus, that's terrifying! Oh my god, that design, the pale fleshy look of his body being entirely of Adawood bark, screaming in agony. I feel bad for people with trypophobia seeing this, ugh! I can't believe this Silent Hill house design was okayed for a kid show. But to continue, the woodsman is going to extinguish the flame as the beast screams he will never see his daughter again.
No! Woodsman!
Goodbye, Beatrice.
Goodbye, Wirt.
And with one breath, the beast is defeated. It's not entirely clear how, if with the beast's death or through the right path, the brothers are brought back to the real world, about to drown. Wirt saves them before passing out, as rescue people come to take them to the hospital as they make a recovery. The kids from the graveyard visit them, as Greg decides the frog's name is Jason Thunderburger, which confuses the real Jason Thunderburger. Sarah asks about Wirt's tapes. She doesn't have a tape player. Wirt says with confidence that they can listen to it at his house, finally asking her out. But it's shown that Greg's frog still has Auntie Whisper's bell in its stomach, implying that trip to the unknown was somehow still a physical event that took place, which is another question the series brings up. Also, the series shown to be in the same world as Clarence, but I've never seen Clarence, so moving on. We get one final glimpse back at the unknown to see how the characters are. We see the woodsman's daughter was never taken by the beast and returns to their house to their joy, and small scenes of other previous episodes, which feels like a nice curtain call to all our adventures and the characters we met. And we get one last look at Beatrice, now with her and her family human, and shows not only was the house in the first episode their house, but also shows that she was the girl in the first scene of the show, as her family's back to normal and happy once more. And one final shot showing Greg's frog was singing the theme song the whole time, as this beautiful series comes to an end.
So the story is complete, and everyone is satisfied with the ending, and so on and so forth, and yet, over the garden wall.
It's hard to really say stuff about this series. It feels like such a unique show, how everything feels almost symbolic. You don't get many concrete answers or explanations on what goes on in the unknown. Like, what are the black turtles and the significance of eating them? Why did the beast have the same eyes as the false beast? How do the dead live again in Pottsfield? How come some of the animals are anthropomorphic and some talk? How come Greg's frog is able to sing in the unknown? What is the history of Adelaide and Auntie Whispers? What was the spirit that possessed Lorna? Was Greg's dream somehow real? And what exactly is the beast? This show raises a ton of questions that it doesn't answer. But that's not a bad thing in this case. None of these actually directly affect the story, but make the world more interesting, more open to speculation and discussion. It's called The Unknown for a reason. Getting blatant answers will take away from the wonder and mysteries of the Dark Forest. It creates us an atmosphere that anything can happen, and the show takes full advantage of that. Each episode feels so drastically different from each other despite it largely taking place in the same setting, and that's wonderful. The fact is, there's not much of an overlying plot. It's a very simple story, and most episodes are pretty self-contained. It's just about two boys lost in the woods trying to get home, and most of the plot revolves on other characters and their growth and twists. And it's amazing how despite that, it tells us a beautiful and engaging story. Over the Garden Wall doesn't want to pander. It doesn't have a demographic it appeals to. It's not trying to demand your attention or be relatable in some modern way. It just wants to tell the story the way it wants. And it had multiple opportunities to do otherwise, and it didn't. And that's why I believe it's become such a cult classic. It's pure. It tells a story everyone can understand, even relate to in some ways. Over the Garden Wall feels so unique amongst other cartoons, and its simplistic yet serialized and engaging storytelling, with its gorgeous vintage-inspired aesthetic and music, and quiet and foreboding tone. I feel everyone can get a little something out of it, or reinterpret the storytelling and characters in a different way, since it's so drenched in symbolism. Now, I don't know how many people know this, but this entire show is a loose allegory for Dante's Inferno, with each episode corresponding to a level of hell. Limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, and so on. YouTuber Trey the Explainer made a fantastic video going well into the small and major details and symbolism of each episode that I highly recommend you watch. But yeah, if you know, you can clearly see how. Two men, one guiding a lost traveler, an important woman named Beatrice, going deeper and deeper to an underworld where a beast lies in a frozen wasteland. It's something that seriously helps the foreboding nature of the show, and adds some legitimacy to the unknown state of a land of living and the dead. Not only for the skeletons in Pottsfield, but the grave soil of Quincy Endicott in the flashback directly shows it is a true type of purgatory, and could possibly help explain the old-fashioned nature of the land and the inhabitants being the souls of those from long ago. Knowing that the unknown is truly a type of underworld makes the world feel more appropriate, but it's not a bad underworld. It has its bright and hopeful inhabitants, as well as evil sinners and monsters, and of course, the Beast. I really want to talk about them. They were fantastic. Again, it's hard to say what is the Beast. Are they the actual devil? Are they a spirit manifestation of the unknown? Is it the original lost soul that wandered into the woods? But I cannot understate the presence of the Beast. The build-up he constantly has. Now he constantly stays in the shadows of the woods, stalking our heroes, until the very end where he has them in his grasp. Their voice acting is so ominous and mysterious, and their dialogue makes their lives convincing. It's such a great antagonist. They're not just a monster, they're a manifestation of doubt, fear, and losing all hope. The Beast never actually attacks, he just uses manipulation as words. That's his biggest strength, his manipulation and power of fear and desolation. He is a perfect villain of this show, and what he embodies works so well with the atmosphere and tone of the series. You can take so much out of what it represents and what all the show represents. It could be a story of maturity as Wirt reconciles with his brother and appreciates him and becomes more confident, as even Greg at the end returns to Rocky's soul, showing he might have grown up a bit more. And it could be to never lose hope, as losing hope would mean death, and it's only through Greg's wonder and Wirt's determination were they able to survive. Or even just to keep whimsy in your heart, as Greg was able to do so much in this story because he kept to his childlike nature. And I still feel there's so much more. I feel everyone can take their own meaning to the story of the show, and it will affect them. It grew such a cult following for a reason. Despite its ambiguity, it really told a completed story. It doesn't need a continuation or sequel, unless maybe it's an Infinity Train like anthology with different characters. I am so satisfied with the 10 episodes we got. This show feels like a storybook come to life. A story of wonder and imagination, comforting yet suspenseful, and one you always want to turn the page to. And it's so beautiful in that regard. It's something I feel everyone should watch. It's truly an experience. And there's no better time now as the leaves fall and as we make our way to winter. So come on and take a trip into the unknown. It's just over the garden wall.
The loveliest lies.
Of all the dirt, you know, in the way of all the dirt.
Mr. Lee, look out! There's a skeleton behind you.